This is reposted.
Today we came across a quote from friend of the show, Gina Grad. She said, if you never had a bad date, you are the bad date. I think this is just across the board. People have a lack of self-awareness. If you've never been at fault for any road rage and traffic, if it's never been your fault with a teacher, you're not aware of what you're doing. You got married. You've been married for a while now, but do you remember any bad date stories, or were you always a peach?
I am going to fundamentally disagree with Mrs. Grad. I was a great date every single time. It was never a bad date. Not one in the history of my life, and I wasn't the bad date. I never was a bad date ever.
So it's a lack of awareness on your part. Like, I don't have you been on a bad date? Where was she?
Absolutely. Yes. I went
it was
lots
never
of bad
your fault.
I definitely was on a bad day. Like I'd go on a date and the woman would take one look at me and she would just turn stone cold, and they were horrible dates. So that happened to me plenty
And that was
of
just
times.
because she was fundamentally not a good person and she didn't.
And she like took a look at me and was like, no, that dude's ugly. I'm just going to freeze him out all night. That happened multiple times. But there was never a time that I saw someone and was like, oh, this is going to suck. I'm going to mail it in. I never mailed it in. I always was like, you know what? I'll ask fun questions. Never.
Okay. Well, I guess I don't have a comeback to that because I wasn't there. But
I once got set up. A friend of mine said, hey, go out with this woman. She was a friend of his, blah, blah, blah. We went out. I proceeded to ask her. I went full Phil Donahue. I proceeded to ask her an hour's worth of questions. She, over an hour, did not have one iota to ever go like, hey, tell me something about yourself. We just met. I made her talk about herself for an hour straight.
Is it possible she doesn't like talking about herself for an hour straight and she just wanted to sit there in silence? So maybe
By the way,
you were a bad date.
Totally could have. You know what? That's a plausible thing. But she talked about herself for an hour and never once said, hey, tell me about yourself. And you know what? Because I didn't want to ever see her again. I was totally fine letting her talk about herself. At the end of the night, I was like, hey, thanks. That was a great time. And I left.
Well, I think some of it, maybe it's not you being a bad date, but some of it is on you. Like, I've had dates that didn't go well, and no, everyone in the world would love you if it wasn't for them.
I understand exactly what Gina's talking about this. And I understand the premise that you're giving, but I never mailed in a date. I always went with a good attitude, even though I didn't like this person. Because my theory about
you're a bad date if you already know that you don't like them.
Well, because it's just there was no attraction. There was no attraction.
Well, that makes you a bad date if you're not attracted to them.
If I'm not attracted to someone, it's a bad date?
I mean, I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. I like to say, well, maybe I could improve in this area. And what you're telling me is I was great. There's nothing better I could do. It's all on them.
No, that's not exactly what I'm saying. Okay. You're exaggerating a little bit. My point was, like, I always brought my game to try to talk and have a good time. I never was like, I feel like what Gina was saying, like sometimes you go out and you immediately don't feel a connection and you kind of go sourpuss and you kind of mail it in.
Well, I'm not saying you did this, but I mean, an example of like talking about yourself, like I could talk about myself for an hour and have a great time and I would be the bad date. And my take on this is more of a lack of self-awareness. But I've ridden in a car with you before, changing it from dating, and you flash your lights at people. You're pretty aggressive. Have you ever been in a situation and be like, oh, I did the wrong thing and that person deserved to honk at me?
For sure. Okay. For sure. All I'm saying is, though, part of my litmus test for a date was if I went on a date with a woman and she talked about herself for an hour straight and never went like, hey, then I was like, oh, this is not the right woman for me. Because anybody that I ever wanted to, like, a conversation is like, you talk for a little bit, someone else talks, you talk. That's like it's a give and take. And if a woman was going to talk for an hour straight and not take a breath, I was like, this date's over in one.
So what's your advice to people that are dating? You have 3 people in your family that theoretically will go on dates. And if they come home and say, that was not a good date, that person I went out with sucked, are you going to say, yeah, it was all them? There's nothing you can change.
My advice will always be like, hey, go give every person a fair shot, let them try to have a good conversation, see what makes the other person tick. But like, I feel like the crux of what Gina was saying is like going with a bad attitude, right? If you go to a date with a bad attitude, that's how and by the way, for the record, dog might have died. Like, I feel like your point is like, you got to give someone a second pass. Like, I probably
no, I don't think you necessarily have to give someone a second pass, but if it doesn't go well, I think you should be introspective on what you could have done differently. I think, I mean, there's so many different things can happen on a date, and so many different, as you pointed out, someone's dog could have died. They could have just gotten out of a relationship, and there's the first date they've ever been on, and things that are out of your control are going to make it not a good date. But to me, this is more of like looking within yourself, being like, well, I could have put on a nicer shirt. I could have spent more time picking out wherever we were going to go. That's more for me, is like, look at what you could have done better and use it as a learning experience. And I see your point as well, but that's how I take this.
But taking it from you, here's how I'll say I could have done better. I feel like every date that when I was dating, I always wanted go on a date to get to know someone, right? And so I would ask a lot of questions, try to get to know them. And maybe I did that too much. Maybe I should have just gone and enjoyed the moment, the movie, whatever we were doing, and not been so maybe aggressive on the getting to know you, and just enjoyed the experience a little bit more. So I think that's one way I probably did it wrong.
Have you had any bad dates as a married person? I went on a date with my wife last Friday and it was wonderful. Does it carry over into marriage? Is it always her?
Hey, you're a newlywed. Psst, you're a newlywed. Newlywed.
So we don't want to answer that one.
No. I mean, we go on all bad dates all the time, because I feel like getting to know. I feel like that's the best part of like dating, is right, getting to know someone, and that you get it. It's a new person. It's a new universe. Blah 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 blah. That's great. And now I'm an old fart who's been married forever.
I think that's interesting, because I don't think dating is necessarily getting to know someone. I think that's a side effect of it. I think it's testing to see your compatibility with them in different situations. And it's not because I've gotten to know you really well and I don't want to be in a romantic relationship with you, but I enjoyed getting to know you. Being a little bit of semantics, but I think overall, I think dating is a little bit different for how I approached it.
No, and I agree. And I think I could have used a little bit of, I should have just let the moment be a little bit more. And I was probably too pushing on the aggressive part. So I definitely feel like introspective Larry's like, you know what? But by the way, I found the gal that I was supposed to marry. So maybe I did it right after all. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, from two guys who aren't dating anymore, if you have any questions, please reach out. You can find us at Reposted Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm Andrew Keller for Casanova Larry, saying thanks for stopping by.